Hey, 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 this is Jasmin Haley from the Beyond the Prophy Podcast, and we have a return guest, Irene Iancu from Toothlife. Irene, I'm very excited to have her. It has been, y'all, 5 years since we've had a discussion with her.
Oh my
It is a lot
gosh.
to catch up on.
Oh my
She
goodness.
came on our show, and the episode is number 94 for those of you that want to see what she was up to at the time of our discussion. But she has been doing some amazing things in her own journey. I know that hearing from her will be a source of motivation and an inspiration for each of you. So, welcome to the show, Irene.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. Wow, 5 years ago. I feel like I've lived a whole life in 5 years. We probably all have felt like we've lived a whole life. I mean, we've had a global pandemic between then and now. Oh my goodness. How are you? Hi. I don't
Yeah,
think
I'm
I've seen
doing.
you since then either.
No, I've been outside of dentistry. I've been building a business outside of dentistry.
I
So
know.
it has been an amazing journey. I actually need to record some time and actually talk about what it was like and what it has been like to grow a brand outside of dentistry. But I've grown a lot myself, and I'm just looking forward to catching up with incredible people like yourself
Yeah.
and also just
Well, we were
hearing some of
supposed to
the.
record a podcast together on
I
my
know.
podcast because I want to ask you about what you've been doing to share it. So maybe we can do that at some point in the next little bit. That'd be great. Reschedule that.
Yes. Yes. I will talk to your people
My people talk to your
and
people.
make that happen.
We have people now. Jasmine, we have people now. Look at us go. We're just going, aren't we? Roller skating away.
Yes, and you know what? I think it's really, really important for dental women, especially, to hear from other women like yourself because there is, I feel like, an air or an unspoken word that people shy away from leadership or ownership and like really pushing themselves in a limit that we weren't taught to do in school. So I'd really want to encourage each of the listeners to really think about expanding their mind and their heart because there's another level of freedom that's on the other side when you think about ownership, when you think about having a business, when you think about branching out in the way that Irene has. So we want to dive into that and talk about where you've been. When we last talked or sometime after, I know you started your own practice. So
Hmm.
tell me what has changed. What are you doing right now with your practice? What does that look like for you now?
Okay. So in 5 years, I've went back to school, became a myofunctional therapist. The first thing I did since you and I last spoke. I quit my job, working full time for a dentist whom clinically was inspiring, but as a business person was horrible to work with. I quit my job, decided to open my own practice, built my own practice as a startup from scratch in downtown Toronto. I opted to not hire a designer because it would have cost me an extra $200,000. So I learned how to use AutoCAD so that I could design my own practice. A
You better
pandemic.
work, girl.
I'm doing the highlights, and then we'll dive
Yes.
into each one. I managed the build of my own practice as a hygienist. I opened post pandemic despite having multiple delays because of construction delays, material delays, shutdown delays, equipment delays was the hardest part. Like, remember the whole microchip thing where like people couldn't get microchips out of
Yes.
Asia? Well,
Yes.
yeah, that affects your Dentsply Sirona chairs that are manufactured in Germany that got stuck on a
Wow.
ship in quarantine because God forbid there should be COVID on a dental chair that's in a box in pieces. Story for another day.
What?
Um, I did that, hired a prosthodontist, hired a dentist, built a team from me being my own receptionist to now 11, working
Mm.
full time, started working 7 days a week. Now I'm working 2 days a week clinically. I went back to school again and did a restorative dental hygiene designation. So now I've expanded my scope of practice even further. And that's the highlights of what's happened within the last 5 years. Went
Mm,
from negative burning 30K a month to netting 120K a month within the last 24 months just by building systems
mm,
and doing the work that I needed to do to be a better employer than all of the employers that I had before.
mm,
And in hygiene, just like in dentistry, there's no difference. People are like, well, a hygienist can do this in Canada. Well, they can do it in the United States too. Dentists don't graduate being leaders and being business owners. We're science people, we're microscope people, we're nerds at heart. And then you put them in this situation where they need to manage different people, different personalities, different learners, communicators, and they don't do the work because you're stuck behind your operatory for 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So when people say to me, well, you only work 2 days a week, I'm like, well, I work 12-hour days in 2 weeks. I work 24 hours in 2 days. I'm up before everyone else and I'm out the door last. But there's
mhm.
a lot of work that you need to put into being a good CEO. And that doesn't necessarily happen when you have a handpiece in your hand or a scaler in your hand. You need to do that work first before you can, the clinical stuff's the easy part.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's what's changed in 5 years. Um, from, an average student, immigrant, refugee from Romania, whom no one thought I would ever succeed. In dental hygiene school, I was like the kid that I was a kid. I was 21 years old in dental hygiene school with no previous dental experience. I was the one that like I could read the book and I knew the info, but I was scaling the mesial and my explorer was I was and my scaler was going distal. Like the terminal shank was constantly hitting the cusps. Like I was that girl where I was like, oh, somehow we'll figure it out. So, things can happen even for the people that were told their entire lives that like, yeah, you're probably never going to really be excellent at anything. You do the work you
Mm.
can be.
I really appreciate you for sharing that, because there's a lot of us that haven't really been poured into in our journey, and what we all have to come to realization at some point in time, and we hope it's done in our lifetime and not when it's too late, that we're fully capable of writing whatever story we want to write for our life. And
Mhm.
it's not dictated by other people's opinions. So I just love the fact that you shared that. I also really love how much of a rock star business owner that you are and
Mm.
acknowledging the fact of the self-development that's necessary. So for the listener, it's like regardless of whether you are um, a an employee or an employer, there is work that needs to be done leadership-wise for all of us to be able to operate to our fullest potential in our personal and in our professional life. So I love the fact that you mentioned that that was a critical piece for you, but you also had a level of awareness too of understanding like, hey, I was in this experience throughout my career and I don't want to repeat it again. So what
Yeah.
is it do I need to learn? What systems do I need to build? What other knowledge do I need to gain? So I really love the fact that you shared that and you were open with sharing that. Were there any hurdles for you um, when you were establishing your business that you needed to overcome as far as getting the word out there and making it sustainable? Because what I have found, especially in my own business and meeting so many people in dentistry and outside of dentistry, many business owners, they fail in their business, and the statistics are really grim, especially for women.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would love to know like what that shift like was for you.
I have always had a fear-based mentality, and you are a product of your upbringing, right? So
Mhm,
and therapy has helped me quite a bit. And
mhm,
and there's still a stigma around therapy that you must be broken if you see a therapist. And,
mhm,
I was an athlete for many years, and
mhm,
you go to physio to stay healthy,
mhm,
not to fix what's broken. I mean, sometimes that happens, but You don't stop going for massages just because you no longer have a kink in your neck. So
Mm,
therapy for me is the exercise for my brain to assist me with that self-awareness, to have not an opinion from someone else, but a perspective from someone else. Like, did you think of it this way? So it's one of those, the light bulb moment for me when I was planning on opening the office and speaking to my therapist, was to talk about my childhood quite a bit. And as a only child, high achieving parents, mom's a derm, dad's an architect and an engineer. Between the two of them, it's like speaking to the Encyclopedia Britannica, which they bought for me for my 7th birthday. Still have those gold foil,
yes.
lovely books. That was the gift that they thought a 7-year-old deserved. Between the two of them, there were always very high expectations. And for someone who didn't speak English until my early 10s, I couldn't read until I was like really well until 13. Um, I was always the dumb kid. I felt like the dumb kid, even though I was never the dumb kid. I had to really think about money the way that my parents taught me to believe that success was a financial thing, and why I made decisions in a fear-based mentality, not a growth-based mentality. So the struggles that I had at the beginning was, well, no one's ever going to come. My doors are going to open and I'm going to have nobody sitting in those chairs that cost X amount of money. It was just dollar signs and dollar signs that were weighing upon me. So probably for the best that I had that mentality early, I just hit the pavement. Like, I printed off little 4x5 or 4x6 cue card things, and I made friends with all of the business owners around my office, because during a pandemic, how are you supposed to get new patients, right? Marketing to social media, no one's going to leave their house. So I made friends with all of the business owners. And I was like, hey, I'm opening up down the street. I don't I don't know you, you don't know me, but we're all in the same struggle at the same time, trying to get people to come into our office, and into your coffee shop and into your restaurant and into the dry cleaners. So the patrons in the neighborhood became my patients. And those
Mm,
patrons ended up telling their patrons. And that is how I built a very community based dental office that, yes, is owned by a hygienist, but functions, looks, and feels exactly like a dental practice. It's so funny. I still get patients that come in, they're like, are you new? 4 years later. I'm like, no, not new. I've been here since the beginning. And they're like, oh, I've never seen you before. I'm like, yeah, I guess it just depends on what day of the week you come in. And I don't like, there's no like owner written on the wall
yeah.
behind me. I don't have like a neon sign with the, like we're all, we're all, I just work here. I make the comment with like some of my team will ask me something. I'm like, I don't know, guys. So you decide what you want to do. I just work here. I'm like, whatever. So that was a challenge that I didn't know that I would have. And unfortunately, my upbringing of having a pretty traumatic upbringing, led me to making better personal connections with the people in the neighborhood. That was a struggle.
Mm,
I had an employee commit suicide. That was a struggle.
mm,
My dental assistant, they don't teach you anywhere how you need to be the strong person for your people in moments like that. And as soon as that happened, I was on vacation, and I was in New Orleans, and I got a text message from um, my office manager at the time that this person hasn't come to work in 2 days, and she was supposed to go out with everyone on Friday night. I love that the team is so connected that they'll like not include me when they go to have a drink. And she was supposed to meet them all, and she never met them, and that was Friday after work. She went and got her lashes done, and they were just like never responded to messages. Monday rolls around. I'm on vacation till Wednesday. Monday rolls around, she doesn't come to work. Tuesday rolls around, that's when I get the message. And I was like, well, let's call her emergency contact and figure it out. And it turns out that she had taken her own life that Friday night, and they didn't find her until Sunday morning. Um, they don't teach you how you need to, it's my chairside assistant, how do you need to just figure it out. You take your moment, you cry your tears, but then you got to keep it together for these 11 people.
yeah.
Come up with
Yeah.
systems. called my therapist. She's like, there's resources for this. Like, these are the things that you need to do. You need to provide a support system. You need to give people time. You need to give them bereavement. This is the list. This is the checklist. Unfortunately, I had to build a system around what do you do when grief happens in the office. Um,
Mm,
that was a really tough thing to have to do for an empathetic human. I feel like I feel everyone's feelings all the time.
yeah.
That was hard.
Mm.
That was really hard.
Thinking about your journey, thank you for sharing that, by the way. Thinking about your journey with your leadership, what would you say are some of the qualities you needed to nurture and gain in order to grow your practice?
I needed to let go of feeling like everyone needs to like me all the time.
Mm,
Um, when people say like, "Oh, we're like a family," you're not a family. She's your boss. Like, we can be friendly, but we shouldn't be best friends, you know? I had to let go of that feeling of like, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to upset her. You should be able to say what you need to say in order to run your business a certain way. I learned that the hard way by befriending someone who I hired, and it turns out they were making all these mistakes that cost me thousands of dollars.
mm,
Um, you know, we're not a family. We could be close. We could be honest with one another. We could be one of my favorite books. I read a lot. One of my favorite business books is Radical Candor by
mm,
Kim Scott. And she has a co-writer with it. And they also have a podcast. And they talk about building relationships with people based on some very distinct pillars. One of them being the ability to speak radically candid. And the only way you can do that is if you lean into other pillars, like caring deeply about people. And that doesn't mean that you buy them gifts all the time. It just means you need to dive into their personal beliefs and their core values and nurture those things. Um, and they have these great exercises that you can do with your team in order to build some of those deeper personal connections so that the radical candid stuff doesn't hurt. It's not a knife, it's not a dig. It's a I love you, but these are the things we need to work on. And then you can, go back to your personal relationships after. So I needed to let go of that. I needed to identify that I am a naturally radically candid person. I don't take offense to things, which means that I am much more blunt than the average human. But that's your typical CEO personality. We don't have time to beat around the bush and to like add a rainbow at the end of every sentence. Like it's like a, hey, Jasmine, I need this by yesterday. Is there a way you can get it done today? The end. There's
yeah.
no like, there's no thank you all the time. Like the pleasantries. ChatGPT is like speaks my language. I was like, this is what my emails already sound like. But then you need to realize that not everyone's going to receive that the right way. So
Yeah.
checking in with people has been something I needed to nurture.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you find that that is also cultural too?
oh yeah, my
Yeah,
mom
European
is like,
culture?
she will tell me where to go and how quickly to get there in
Yeah,
35 seconds.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, the Eastern Europeans,
Yeah.
you don't even need words. It's just the eyes. It's like, I know what that meant. Like that was
Mhm.
end period sentence. It was like the yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But I love that you share that. Yeah, letting go is huge. I feel
Yeah.
that I'm a very sensitive person myself, but I
See, I don't
also
get that
learned
from you at all.
extremely.
Huh.
Extremely. So I feel like for me, I've put up a lot of barriers and kind of blocks to not
Mm.
let people get in because when I let people become really close to me, I am like one of those ride or die, very loyal to folks. And not a lot of people operate in that way. And so
Interesting.
I get hurt very easily and deeply for years.
Oh.
Okay, I could deal with stuff.
Oh, the grudge.
So
The holding of the grudge. Oh no, Jasmine, no.
yes, yes. So
Oh.
I just find it interesting that you say that because that was a huge shift for me as well of just learning how to let go. But I saw how it started to impact my business with the way I hired
Mm,
folks. And I actually just recently attended a training on EOS, and it let me appreciate just about myself. I'm actually holding on to hiring folks that I hire a lot longer than I should. And I
mm,
need a system, like a card or something like that to make sure things are on track because my
yeah.
emotions tend to get involved. And that's not going to help with a business that you're trying to scale.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
and I'm the complete opposite. So you and I need to make a business baby together that can be the human in the middle. That's my assistant, Holly. My EA, Holly, has been with me for almost 3 years.
Mhm.
And she's that. She speaks radically candid to me,
Mhm.
but she also knows how to communicate. She was my EA, now she's my director of operations. So she now is able to be that mediator between me and the team, which I think has kept things a lot friendlier, um,
Mhm.
because of how she knows other people communicate. And I very much am. I'm the 5 minute task person. So anything in my Notion or in my Trello, it
Mhm.
needs to be a 5 minute task or less. Otherwise, I'm sending it back to you. I'm like,
Yeah.
and my comment is, this is not ready for me yet. That's like the copy and paste, like XYZ, this is not ready for me yet. And I send it
Yeah.
back and they're just like, oh, that B. um,
Oh, I
so
love that though. I love it. I love it. And I think we need to
Well,
hear more of
there's a
it.
lot, right? There's
Yeah.
we've got clinical dental hygiene, we've got clinical restorative dental hygiene, we've got myofunctional therapy, we've got the business, we've got
Yeah.
speaking,
Yep.
the podcast,
Mhm.
paid partnerships for social media. Like
Mhm.
those are all itty bitty little businesses that all add up, right? So if
Yeah.
I have a 45-minute task for each one of those sides of the business, like I'm never getting anything done.
Mm.
So it needs to be the system needs the checks on the checkbox need to be when it's ready for me, it's ready for me. Favorite book that I think everyone needs to read is called The Go Giver. I don't know if you've read it. It comes in a
No.
series. It's a little teeny tiny thin book. Similar look and feel to Tuesdays with Maury, which is also a great book. And it's a storytelling book about this hotshot insurance sales kid that comes into a new role, gets paired up as a mentor with someone who's been there for 40 plus years. And he's taught a series of lessons by meeting different people and there's a plot twist at the end that I won't tell you about, but um, it's one of those books that really made me change my perspective on how I build relationships with people. For example, I'll give you an example of one of the people that he talks with. This gentleman who's been married to his wife for like 50 years. And the young guy says, well, what's the secret to a long marriage? And he said, there is no 50-50. There is no, it's 100%, 100% all the time. But it doesn't mean that your 100% is always going to be at their 100%, but you always need to give 100%. And in that relationship, when someone's not doing so great, you're still giving your 100% and you're doing it just out of pure joy and good-heartedness that your intentions are that person above and beyond yourself. And I think about that in business, that my
Mhm.
intentions in my practice are my people 100% of the time. And that might mean that I take less. That might mean that I don't make as much that month. But for example, in my clinical practice, no one gets sent home early. If we don't have patients, dental hygienists know very well that if your day falls apart, you're getting sent
Yep.
home. Why? Because you're getting paid a lot per hour. And if there's no one in that chair, who's paying you? It's out of the
Mhm.
pocket. So in my office, in their contract, they are guaranteed their hours. Reception, assistants, floaters, hygiene, office manager, anyone, and everyone is guaranteed their hours. If you want to leave and you choose to leave, you're actually taking it out of vacation day.
Mm.
There's always
Wow.
something to do. There are things that need to
Yes.
be organized. And there's always that complaint, well, I never have time to do this because we're always so busy. So I took that from that book that I want people to feel safe in the money that they're earning, to be able to pay their families, to, or like support their families, to pay their bills. If I can't fill the chair, that's a me problem. That's a boss problem. That's a marketing problem. That's a CEO problem. If you aren't busy and you don't have clients, that's not your hygienist problem. It's
Mm,
doing the work. It's not
you
your
preach it.
assistant's problem. If your day falls apart because you have a not great cancel it. Not great cancellation problem. You told me at the beginning of this, everyone, no cussing. I fix that. If you don't have a great cancellation problem, the cancellation policy, and people cancel last minute and you have empty chair time, that's a CEO problem. It's a management problem. So I took that from the book and I was like, and my employee retention is the highest that it's ever been because people feel safe
And
and
they
they
take
work harder
ownership.
for you.
Yes,
Mhm.
they take
They work
ownership of
harder
their
for
role.
me.
Yes.
Yes, because they're so used to it. I get the tiptoe sometimes, like a new employee will come in um and they'll be like, "Do you want me to go home?" I'm like, "Nobody's going home. You're here." And then they do stuff. They're like, "Oh yeah, now I get to, count all the composite." Like, okay, that sounds exciting. But
Mhm.
we need to figure out our ordering and do an inventory. So like that book, you take those lessons and you develop them in your brain to the business that you're in. Could be dentistry, could be medicine, could be anything, could be social media, could, you want to write. Um, that really helped me identify core value characteristics of being a good human and how that impacts growth.
Mm. I wanna dive in, y'all, normally we do about 20 minutes, but this conversation is too juicy, okay?
Oh.
So we're gonna extend this episode, but I wanna dive into a critical piece because I notice, and this I most dental folks are scared to talk about money.
Mhm.
They actually are told not to. I've been told not to say certain things, and I remember my first year that I finally reached 6 figures in my business, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was so difficult." It felt like it
Mhm.
was so hard to finally reach that, and I would just love to know from you, with you building a business, because I the figures that you shared earlier, it's very clear where your
Yeah.
practice is at. Um, what kind of shifts did you need to make in order to be profitable? Because there's shame, or people will shame you and say, "Oh, you're just
Sure.
about money." And it's like, "No, there's nothing wrong with women. Actually, women need to make money because when we have money, we do better. We do
Yeah.
better for our community. We give back in more ways than men ever think about. But yet
Mhm.
there's a negative, shameful kind of thing when you're like, "Well, how much are you going to pay me? What's the exchange here? Does it make sense for my business growth?" So I would love for you to kind of share the shifts and what you needed to do in order to build sustainability, but also profitability with your brand. Your brand is your speaking, the podcasting, the micro influencer, social media, the practice that you have. And I think it will be awesome and inspirational too for the listeners to kind of hear your thought process around that.
Yeah. I talk about money all the time, and our team talks about money. So we have a variety. Let's break it up into the different sides of the business. There's the at Toothlife Irene side, and then the practice side, and those are separate goals, separate people,
Hmm.
separate finances. Corporate structure is completely separate. The
Hmm.
way that we manage money is completely separate. But there are some similarities in how we include everyone. So for example, at the office, we set targets. We set daily targets, weekly targets, monthly, quarterly, and then the big annual. And the big annual at the end is helpful because if we hit all of those other goals, we 1% of that money goes back to the team. So it gets
Mm.
divided based in a system, and people get a little extra bonus at the end of the month or at the end of the year. Um, we print off our day sheets in the morning, and we also print off at the end of the day to look at what our production was. Fun fact, My hygienist is a commission-based hygienist. She makes 30% of everything she bills. Do you know how
Mm.
much she makes per hour on average over the last 6 months?
100?
80 to $90 an hour.
Oh, I was close.
You're close. You're close. That is wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild. When I tell people this, they're like, "You're losing so much money." I'm like, "No, I am gaining so much value because she is reappointing like crazy. She's building connections with people. She is offering solutions to problems patients didn't even know that they have." So, like, talking about the money is important. Um, and when something works, it works. You need to repeat it. You need to figure out what it was, identify it, pinpoint it. So last month, we made the most we have since the beginning of time. And usually,
Mhm.
dental offices fluctuate month to month, and growth
Yep.
grows from one year to the next. But last
Mhm.
month, we did 130K. And I wonder, what was that? I was away most of the month. I worked 6 days in July. So it
Mm.
wasn't me. I didn't do exceptional dentistry last month. I was in Spain, I was in Ireland, I was in all of Chicago, I was speaking, I was
Mm.
away. Dental office operated without me better than it does with me. So what did we do differently? And you need to separate yourself from that and say, okay, my AR guy, I got an AR guy, all he does is AR, constantly checking in with insurance, constantly calling, all he does is that one job. That's his job. My office manager, she's doing those things. And I think we expect people to be able to do too many different things. And we are afraid to pay people and put our, hard-earned cash on the line. And we try and find this magical human. So my office manager is going to do everything. She's going to do the AR. She's going to manage the people. She's going to do the fun stuff. She's going to set the lunches and the baby showers and the what. That is not humanly possible. So taking money away from you and giving it back to your team in turn makes you more money because you're giving people a very focused job. They get to be in that flow work state for much longer than bouncing back and forth, right? Like, Jasmine, you
Yeah.
record podcasts like I do. We bulk batch record. You're in your
Yep.
flow state for that day. You've got 5 episodes, 10 episodes, whatever it is.
Yep.
And then you can step away on Wednesday or Thursday and you're doing something else and you're in that job
Yep.
flow state.
Yep.
So that is one thing. Talking about the money, talking about what works, what didn't work. Office is in the multiple seven figures,
Mhm.
which is great. It didn't start that way. I remember seeing my first accounting report, which is like this beautiful pie chart that shows you where your overhead is. And my overhead was at like 70% when I first opened. That was also COVID money.
Wow.
And then
Well,
it
that makes
went
sense.
to,
That makes sense.
right, it was like COVID stuff. And then it went to like 68 and then 65 and then 62 and then 50, and the best month was in 48. And I'm like, okay, well, what did we do in the 48? How much money did we make versus how much money did we spend and where did we spend it and why did that happen? So it's taking these patterns, identifying them, and then recreating them in order to then have better months. So what were my labs at? My labs were at 3 to 4%. That's where I want them to be. What was my ordering at? My ordering was at 6%. So, like, all of these perfect little metrics and then trying to recreate them. So last
Mhm.
month, not only did it produce the most, but all of those other numbers were where I wanted them to be too.
Mhm.
On the social media side, on the speaking side, again, I have three people that run my life. So I have Holly, my director. I have a clinical content coordinator, Victoria, who proofreads everything, edits everything, my articles. She helps me create my lectures now. And then my social media manager, and basically a full time editor who edits the podcast, who edits all of my social posts in order for me to be here with you. I have,
Mhm.
3.5 ish people whom I pay salaries to. They're
Mhm.
not freelancers that I hired from Bangladesh. They're
Mhm.
humans that are in my own country who
Mhm.
are clinical people. Like Victoria's a restorative dental hygienist,
Mhm.
um, who I've invested in order to be able to produce the best type of content.
Yeah.
You got to spend money to make money.
Yep. Yep. I love that. And the spending money also looks like a term that I like to use, which I think you referenced that, just investing in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's an investment in yourself. And I love the fact that you really share the behind the scenes of what it takes to run a brand and eventually at some point in time just ourselves. We can't do it all. We have to be able to hire folks and understand that the I guess the first I guess the first thing that kind of came up, I'm trying to think about my very first hire, and I was worried
You have an
about losing the
EA.
money. Yes.
Yeah, I remember you
I
you implemented an EA. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and I was scared about losing the money. I was
Hmm.
really scared about losing the money, but it allowed me to do so much more
Yeah.
with my business and my brand. So I love that
And
you
some
shared
months
that.
I'm in the red. I mean, when I look at my financial reports, the office is usually in the green now. Some months I'm in the burn in social media because other clients popped off or they want to take a break or their marketing budgets didn't align or whatever it happens. Sometimes I'm in the red and speaking because I've chosen that, for the month of September, I don't want to go anywhere. So like
Yeah,
Holly can't hit her targets of her 2 webinars and 1 in-person web lecture per month if I choose I don't want to go somewhere for that month because I need a break. And then some months we're in surplus because I'm like bopping from city to city doing lecture after lecture with a webinar in between.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it all balances out in the end. So you can't be so hyper focused on that one month. So, like, our target for social media is that social media is making 30K a month. My speaking stuff target is that we're making 15K a month. Retail is making 12K a month. Like all of these little things, add up, but sometimes social media will make 50
Mhm.
and speaking will be at 0 because of that choice that I made, or someone cancels, or my flight gets whatever, all of the
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Um, so having an annual target and a deliverable target is much more beneficial to me. But I'm also not a financially money driven person. So,
Mhm.
for example, most of the profits from the dental office stay in the account. It's
Yep.
also a tax thing where if you pull
Mhm.
it out, you're paying a different tax amount versus if it's in your corporate account. So I take what I need,
Mhm.
not always what I could have, and it's just the way that I function. I've never been a financially driven person because I've always lived in that scarcity of finance mindset. It's been the save, save, save instead of the spend, spend, spend.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, but there's
and also the
still
fear of like I need to pay people, so you know,
exactly. There's risk
like
in it, and you
sure,
also said there's months where it's gonna be in the red, so you do have to plan for that. One of the things that I've had to learn is of, projecting.
yeah,
Projecting out, like, looking at my full year, like you said, with the strategic plan, understanding how much you wanna make each month, and then kind of reverse engineering that and staying on
yeah,
task with that, but that's gonna require you to take some space, delegate some things off your plate so that you can stay on top of that, and that is an important part and role of a business owner, of making
yeah.
sure that those things are that they're prioritized. All right, we're getting to the close of our discussion, so I have one last question for you, Irene.
And I have one last statement if you're
Okay.
open to it. I
Yes.
made a really hard decision in July to end a partnership with a company that I've been working with since the beginning. This is the first time I'm actually talking about it.
Wow.
So, my very first paid partner, instrument company, I'm sure if you follow me, you know who they are. Um, I used to make videos, Instagram videos in my basement. I bought this light box and I would scale in the sparkly type it on, and I charged $75 for a reel. At the time, they weren't really reels, they were just a video. Um, and it would take me all day to get the perfect camera angle with my iPhone 5, whatever it was that I had propped up. It was like when I look back at those videos now versus the quality of the videos that we create now, it's so
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
But you grow, and sometimes you grow away from people, places, and things.
Mhm.
And it was a big decision because the feedback that I received is that your fees are too high, and my fees are not too high. The quality of the stuff that we do has changed. The
Mhm.
humans that work on my team has changed. It's
Mhm.
just the expectation that has changed. So I had to let go of that, which was one of the hardest partnership decisions that I ever made And in this time from July until, till we find the right person or the right company to fit that spot, I will probably be in the red, but I'm okay with it because it's giving us a time to reestablish and redevelop who we want to be as a brand. Who does Toothlife Irene? Who is Toothlife Irene? If not for, how do you define yourself? If not for your paid partnerships, if not for the people that are paying your paycheck, how do you define yourself as a creator? Do you have a definition? And I think for many months, years, I didn't. I was creating the content that people were paying me to create and not necessarily the content that I wanted to create, which now that I think about it is kind of cringy because you are then just doing it for the paycheck, even if the paycheck doesn't matter to you, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You became more
So
values aligned, values driven in your
so
approach.
you got to be okay with knowing that you're going to be in the red for a bit to
Mhm.
to then be the better version of yourself on the back end.
Mm, that was good. That was
Mic
good.
mic drop.
That was a mic drop.
The
I'm not
cat
gonna
the
answer the
cat is out of
question.
the bag. I've been
That was
wondering
so
how I
good.
was going to share that information because, yeah, but
I
now
mean,
here it is.
we all need to hear that. Even for myself, I need to hear that. Just with my own rebrand and the things that I'm doing and the fact that I decided to come back and reopen up what I've been doing with Beyond the Prophy because there's a need, there's a gap, and there's so
Mhm.
many other incredible stories that need to be told like yours. Like that's beautiful because a
I
lot of
mean,
us
that
feel
whole
that.
that whole partnership should be should be discussed. I mean, I've been toying with the idea of like putting together an influencer kind of connection group, but that's the thing is nobody wants to talk about the money. No one wants to talk about the fees. No one wants to talk about the contracts. I mean, I'm open to talking about all of it. I feel like it needs to be talked about. Um,
Absolutely. That's the only way
but
that we can advance. We can actually get further than where we're at. But
right,
unfortunately, there's a lot of hush hush around that.
it's the
And
competition mindset.
yes, people are trying to hold on to their own pockets and coin, which I feel like we can all win. We can
Hmm.
all win if we are truly coming together. But there's still separation. That's a story for another day.
Another day, part two. See, if you liked this episode, you need to comment and like. And if it gets comments and likes, then Jasmine's going to know that we need to do a part two.
Yes, yes. And make sure you leave a podcast review. Let us know.
Yes.
Please tell the listeners where they can find you.
Tooth Life Irene. That's it.
That's it.
Everywhere with that name. Branding on point.
Well, thank you. This was an incredible conversation. I'm so very thankful to you for spending the
Thank
time and
you.
sharing from the heart. This was just a beautiful, beautiful discussion, and I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. Me too. I appreciate it. Nice to see you again. So we'll see each other in 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sounds good.
Calendar. Let's get that calendar. Okay. Peace out, babes.